It's nefarious, man. Like, the brain works in fucked up ways.
The mind is one of the most deceiving, manipulative pieces of equipment, flesh, human bodies on earth. I never have trusted my brain.
All of that weight lives in your head, and you are the decision maker.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Hi, it's Ronsley. If this is your first volume, welcome. This is a weekly series where I go inside the mind of an entrepreneur, artist, athlete, academic to decipher what is the psychology of our decisions. I'm Australian, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians throughout Australia and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures and to elders past, present, and emerging of the land I'm standing on today. I extend my respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who listen to this. This week on The Psychology of Entrepreneurship, we're releasing our first full-length interview. When I had the pleasure of diving inside the mind of CEO and founder of Techstars, David Cohen, I thought that was going to be an insightful first interview for you to hear what he actually had to say. Techstars is a worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. So besides being experienced in creating multiple successful startups himself, David also has a fairly good idea of how the business brain works and why some businesses fail compared to others. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes when producing a volume for this series, and although we try to provide you with little gems from each interview, it's really hard to cut them down, and there's a lot of incredible advice and stories that unfortunately never gets released. Well, until now. Today, ladies and gentlemen, prepare for David Cohen Uncut. And when I say uncut, I mean uncut. But I wanted to release this volume as our first one because the world is kind of crazy right now. And David's approach to entrepreneurship and leaving the world a better place is something that I think we all can learn a lot from right now. While you're listening to this, I want you to think about why you're doing what you're doing and why now is the perfect time to decide whether you're living your life according to your values and whether they are in alignment with what you truly, truly want to achieve. But anyway, I'll pass this over to me from the past. This is an audio documentary. Great. So it's a bit different, like in terms of how it turns out. It's like nothing we've ever done or anyone's ever done before. And it's on the psychology of entrepreneurship, basically what happens in between the mind. And I know you guys are heavily involved in mental health with Brad Feld and all that kind of stuff. But just so we can use this for the tape, right? Who you are and what you do. You know how people say like, hey, I'm Ronsley, I'm from Amplify and whatever. Could you give us that one line so I could get that on tape?
Sure. I'm David Cohen. I'm one of the founders of Techstars, which is the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed.
So this is a bit of an organic sort of conversation. We take that all and then put it together in a quite an interesting way. But when you see Techstars growth and when you look back and you kind of go, did you expect it to be here at all? Did you have any sort of like, because people kind of go, what's my vision? What's my goal? Look at the next 20 years. Is that a thing?
For us, not at all. And it's my second experience where I had something that was quite successful and large that I had no expectation that it would get to that scale or have that level of meaning. And I think a lot of people fit the origin story to, what they want you to hear from a marketing perspective. My co-founder in my first business wrote a book called No Vision, All Drive. We used to say that we thought we could get to $1 million in revenue and maybe be 10 people. And of course, it was much bigger than that, right? So we had no expectation that an ambulance software dispatch company could be so large. And I think the same is true for Techstars. When I started it, it was a fun thing to do in the summer. So I'd have time during the rest of the year to travel and have fun. And now, I travel because the thing is all over the world, but it was pulled there. It was never a master plan to get there.
Yeah. But your experience in business building is quite remarkable with, the new floating a company, I suppose. What was that like? Was that something that when you were going through it for the first time, did you kind of go, can I do this? Or is this possible? Or was the outcome like, how did that feel?
I've had one job interview in my whole life, right? I was like you, I was a programmer. My first job was just programming, right? I got that job because that's what I went to school to learn, and I didn't really know who I was yet. And I did that for a little bit, and I realized I'm just called to start things, right? To be an entrepreneur, to create. And so that's what I've been doing my whole life. And for me, it is fairly natural to start a thing. I view it as like art, and programming is like art too, right? It's creating something from nothing, and seeing it come to life.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about entrepreneurship also. So, my mindset is I love doing that. I don't mind the risk of it because I ask myself, what's the worst thing that can happen? I could always go get a job somewhere, right? Sure. But do I know it's going to be successful? Do I have extreme confidence? Absolutely not, right? It's you just feel lucky that it's starting to work if it is. And I've had failure too, right? You experience entire companies that fail. So that's part of the game.
I want to get into failure because it seems to be something that while we grew up, we could never do. And now it's this thing that everyone's saying that should be part of our repertoire. Like everyone's suggesting it, I suppose, after they've failed and succeeded, I suppose, and figured out that it's basically how long you're in the game, like the longer you're in the game, the more success you'll have, I suppose. When you say start and create, and you mentioned art, because it is art. I wrote a thesis on software quality, and the best part about that whole thing was software is volatile. You can't touch it. So how do you measure quality based on that? And I find that starting something you can get in your head a lot. You can stop yourself, you can doubt yourself, or you can over exaggerate as well. Like there's all these different ways. What are your experience? You've seen how many startups? What is your experience around that? Because I feel like it's a head game when it comes to starting.
For sure. There's a big challenge in starting a new company, right? I'm as an investor, over 2,000 companies in the portfolio. Most of that with Techstars, but some in my kind of personal angel portfolio as well. And you sort of feel like at that point you've seen everything, but then you realize every day that actually you haven't. There's always something new. But I think this is one of the biases that Techstars has about not funding companies that are founded by one person. We really like to found teams, to fund teams that are founding a company together. And the reason is because almost by definition, any individual is going to hit a wall, get frustrated. You don't have a support system for that, you're in trouble, right? And especially in the context of an accelerator, which can be a high pressure environment for 3 months. And so we more or less filter it out to have someone that's just by themselves for that very reason. And, you need someone that when you're up, they're down and vice versa, right? And you can, when you literally hit the wall, and I can remember, being angry and literally hitting a wall, right? The other person says, we're going to be okay, we'll figure this out, right? And you have that support. So I think that's really key.
When you spoke about that story about hitting the wall, what was that? What happened there? Do you mind sharing?
Sure. Yeah, I remember in the first company. I remember in the first company that I started, losing a prospect that we thought was going to change everything. And this was a bootstrapped company. We never raised any money from anyone other than our customers, which is unique today.
Yeah.
But we had a prospect that we didn't get, and we'd spent a lot of time and energy on it, and the bank account was near zero, and we were stressing about whether we could buy a printer or not for the office. It was that sort of situation, and it's just frustration. And I remember going into a stairwell in the building that we were in, and hurting my hand because I hit the wall. Yeah. And it's a metaphor, but I'm not a person that you would normally expect would literally hit a wall or express frustration that way. And I remember, David Brown, my co-founder, one of my co-founders in that company, coming into that stairwell and saying, dude, it's okay. And I was like, screw this. Let's quit. This is never going to work, right? We're killing ourselves here and we're not getting anywhere. And, he brought me back up. And I can remember doing similar things for him, but, it hurt my hand that day. And that's why I remember it.
Yeah, I'm glad we caught that story. Because I feel like once we're on the other side, everyone kind of looks at us and almost can't relate for some reason. And I don't know why that is. And I'm saying us. My entrepreneurial journey is fairly young too. But when you look back, I mean, everyone could list your successes and look at all the stuff that you've done. But when you look back, when David Cohen looks back and goes, oh my God, this is the kind of impact I made, because you just told me about the ambulance software all over Queensland and the kind of impact globally that you're making. And you kind of, not only that, leave what I'm saying, leave my biases out of this, I suppose. What do you look back and go, these are my highlights?
Well, it's a great question, because I probably, like most people, don't do that enough. I don't reflect on that enough. I would say when you talk about that ambulance dispatch company, which is now part of a much larger conglomerate that was bought by somebody that bought it, and et cetera, but it's still going. It's probably 400 or 500 employees. So there's the employee thing. Like, you feel like, oh, you're creating opportunity for people. And when you look at the Techstars portfolio, right? I mean, that's tens of thousands of jobs, probably more. And that feels good, right? That of course, those people will be working somewhere else, but they're working on a thing that feels interesting and innovative. So that's a nice thing to look back on. I would say, with the ambulance dispatch software specifically, last time I looked, there were 20 million ambulance dispatches that had gone out on that software. That's a lot of people that you're helping, probably a few that you didn't help, because software is never perfect. Mm. But, you think about those people are in a moment of distress, and you have software that can get an ambulance there quicker, right, with the right equipment and stuff. Like, that's still running in the world. And I go to places, I still see that software, even though it looks old to me 20 years later. So it's those lasting things. I mean, as a software engineer, that the best thing is when somebody's using your stuff, right? Like, that's why we do it. And then I guess the other thing I would say I would have some pride in is what I would call kind of the meta impact of mentorship and encouraging a generation of entrepreneurs to give back to the next one, and organizing, kind of mentorship activity where you have people that maybe were successful that, could be sitting on a yacht somewhere, but they're investing in startups and giving back to the startup community. And that is a very powerful long-term dynamic too. So, I get some pride about those things. There are plenty of things I screwed up along the way too, and could have done a lot better and had a lot more impact. But hopefully those are things that I can, sit in the rocking chair and think about.
You mentioned all the stuff that you've created, but you've created more. I mean, family, friends. We would not be here if not for friends, even sitting across from each other, and friends that speak extremely highly of you, and not because you've done all this stuff, because of the person you are. Do you want to talk to that?
Well, obviously people have false impressions. Maybe the person in common you're talking about is Philip McKernan, who's a great friend of both of us, I think. And, I've only known him for a short time, a couple of years, and got to spend some time together with families and all of that. And it's become a nice friendship. But I think, that's the stuff of life, right? It's relationships, and, he'll open doors for me, right? I'll try to do the same for my friends. And I think they're people that we believe have the same values, same motivations, which is to actually genuinely help people. And I think that's who I try to surround myself with, is people that think about we call it give first, but how can I be helpful? I don't need anything in return, but I know that magically, if I do that, the universe is going to give me good stuff back too. I have no idea what it's going to be, where it's going to come from, who it's going to come from. And it's not at all transactional. But I find that when you think about relationships that way, it's incredibly powerful for the long term. Things come back to you in completely unexpected ways.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, my wife always tells me how lucky I am. Like, people come in a market. Like, this is the most craziest one that's happened to me. Like, someone came to us in the market and gave me a watermelon and said, "This is my last watermelon. I've got to go home, but I think you should have it." And Rochelle just looked at me going, "This, like, I've seen everything now, right? But is it something that happens to us that makes us believe that? What, like, because you also meet the other side, right? You also meet the other people when you go to the networking events, or even mentorship. I mean, you mentioned mentorship, which is means a lot to you. You see the other side, and what is it? How does someone think differently, or is it just because they are different, the experiences they've had, or what makes them think like that?
Yeah, I mean, I always try hard not to sort of have judgment about how people think, because it's what you said, right? They grow up with a different bias. They have a different set of experiences. We all have biases. We all have experiences. Adam Grant's book, of course, Give and Take, on this topic is an awesome read if you haven't checked that out. But, some people are balancers, right? They view it as transactions. Like, I'll do that for you if you do this for me, or if you pay me whatever. Other people are takers, right? And they're just going to take. And it's hard for givers, right, to recognize that that's what happens with takers. So I think that people who naturally think about helping others are just my people. And I try to surround myself with people like that. I don't think the other people are bad.
Sure.
I think they just have a different way of going about life. And I don't think it's as powerful. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. And, last thing I'll say is I love that your wife says that you're really lucky. Probably she says it to be married to her. It's incredibly lucky for you, right?
It's funny you say all that, because the work I'm doing with Philip is recognizing my old self-worth, which is insane that you say all that kind of stuff. And in fact, the last time we did some work together, the thing that came up was, I can't believe my wife married me. Like, she could have married anyone on the planet, right? And I said that to Rochelle. I was like, you could have married anyone on the planet. Like, I don't understand why you're with me. And she's like, because I could have married anyone on the planet. That's why I'm with you. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a cool statement. That's a quote right there.
That's a line. She's trying to pick you up. that really is that's a good one. I gotta refer that line to others.
Philip mentioned in passing, and I don't know how much you can talk about this, but One Last Startup seemed to be something that resonated with you with One Last Talk. And I experienced my first One Last Talk in Cabo, by the way. Let's talk about that experience first.
Yeah, One Last Talk. I went to the one in Boulder, I don't know, 6 months or a year ago, and it was on a weekend, and I had no idea what to expect. Philip just said, you got to come to this thing, and someday you'll be on stage doing this. I said, well, I'm an introvert. I don't know if I'll ever do that. But I came, and I, just crying. Like, I've never spent an entire day just basically crying, right? So emotional. And, that'll turn a lot of people off from the event, but basically people are standing up saying the one last thing they would ever say to the world, right? Even though they're not, it's not the last thing, they're pretending that it would be. And what would they want to convey to the world? And the stories are just so incredibly powerful, right? People that have gotten out of a long-term jail sentence talking about, when the thing happened that put them in jail and how they feel about it today and their journey. People talking about, abuse, right? They were abused maybe as a child in some way. And God, it's just such an emotional thing. And it's a construct that I loved the first time I saw it, which is just the mental model of this is the last time you'll be able to say something to the world. What do you want to say? It's meaningful. And I immediately thought of the startups that I work with. And I thought of Startup Weekend, which we run 1,000 times a year in 120 countries. And I said, there's 100,000 would-be entrepreneurs going to these things. Like, what if we inspired them and said, what if this was your one last startup? Right. And Philip and I were just rapping on it after that event. And, sort of naturally clicked for both of us that that's powerful, because people go and build, really nice companies that make, ad units 1% more efficient, and drive some, cool efficiency into, and it's maybe worth a lot. But is it the last thing you'd ever do as art? Back to what we talked about earlier. Startups are art. And if you only got one left in you and you have that mindset, what would you do next? And if we can get the entrepreneurs thinking about that at the inception of their company, that can be powerful for sort of doing good in the world and having actual impact, rather than, no offense to the people working on ad units, but it's not changing lives or making the world a better place.
Statistics show that 26% of entrepreneurs say their biggest motivation to start their own business was to be their own boss. Pursuing their passion came in close behind, with 23% of those surveyed saying that this is the reason that they decided to become an entrepreneur.
Since we started to speak, which hasn't been long, but there's a recurring theme of you wanting to help the world. And whether it's I don't think it's a statement you made per se, but it's the things you say and the things that mean a lot to you. Do you know why?
I just think it's innate in people, right? I mean, you want to, look, we're all here for a short period of time. Different people believe different things. I believe you get a short period of time and that's it. And so, do something good with your time here. But it's back to human relationships, right? If you can leave the world a little bit better than you found it, that's sort of all you can ask of anyone, right? And I think, when people say, why did you create Techstars? What I usually say is, because I believe that entrepreneurs make the world a better place. I believe that innovations make the world a better place. And, we don't fund things that don't do that fundamentally. If there's, we've stayed away from, obviously things like pornography or things like even cannabis, right, which is not legal, everywhere. We just decide that we'd rather put our money and our energy into things that are clearly helpful to the world. And so to me, it's just innate. It's sort of how I think as a human.
Yeah.
And it's not an attempt to create legacy or anything like that. It's just, I want to be able to point to something and say that thing is doing good. And look, there's giving back to this foundation that's doing this other good. And there's network effects around it. Huge believer in networks for good, generally.
We were talking about one last startup, and when you mentioned when people start stuff, it seems like they start stuff for the wrong reasons, and no better person to ask than someone who loves to start stuff and has helped, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people to start stuff. What's happening? What is happening there? Is it the mentorship that's failing us as a collective? Is it that the social media, the hustle porn is becoming like what? There's all these things, right? What do you reckon? Like how have we how do we not think that let me do something that's going to change the world? What stops us? What makes us play small, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing I see over and over again, in effectively being part of the founding story of thousands of companies, is the thinking about, why they're doing it is often not front and center early on. And, Simon Sinek, Start With Why, huge proponent of that. Pretty much the first meeting I ever have with any entrepreneur is like, tell me why you're doing this and not something else. And if I see something in their background that feels like it's obviously suited to something else, I just say, why aren't you doing something in music? Like, it seems like you love music. And it's love, right? It's like the thing you actually care about. This entrepreneurship is really hard, and most people are going to fail. and you might as well fail doing something that you actually care about and have a vision for changing the world regarding that thing. So I think what people do is they get out their spreadsheets and, they read about the venture capital and, the $100 million fundraise, and they view that as success. WeWork's in the news today, right? It hasn't led to necessarily success for all those employees. And that happens a lot, right? It's sort of coveting the wrong things. And so the thing I always push on hard is, why this? Why were you put on this earth to do this thing? I love the ad of, what if it's the last thing you could ever do? Because people say, well, I want to do that later. No, do that now, because that's what you love. None of the companies I ever started were started to create wealth. They were started to have a fun thing to work on that I was actually excited about doing, to create a product. Maybe the chance of that, but not front and center. So I would say that the people who are starting with the spreadsheet and saying, I'm doing this because it's a great business, have a very high chance of failure and have a lot to learn.
That's so interesting you say that, because I'm the artist, right? And I'm the creative. And whenever someone, I try to explain, not now, but initially when I was getting off the ground in the first few businesses, it was like, do you have a business plan? And here's the kicker. My first business failed with $478,000 in debt after I had an MBA. Just to your point about, the spreadsheets don't work. I think that, I wonder whether we have to go through that to understand that that is not the path. Do you feel that?
Probably some people do, right? I feel like I got lucky in that the first thing I worked on was ambulance dispatch software. And I told you the story earlier. I had one job interview in my life. That was the job I got, was working for an ambulance dispatch company building software. And I said, we can do this better, right? And created a service to do it better. And, it's pretty easy to get motivated about getting an ambulance to pick somebody up when they're hurt, right? So I had this natural, intrinsic motivation that I didn't need to create for myself. I was thinking about the person laying there with the broken leg, right, when I was creating the software. And that is a nice natural motivator. Is that the business I would start today, given, what I know about myself? Probably not, but it was lucky in the sense that it had that built-in motivation. Had that been the ad unit company and someone had pitched me on, how much money we could make doing this, I think it would be a special form of torture, because I don't know anything, care at all about that. I don't want to make that better. And, to spend my time and my energy doing that, I would have just been done, right? And it would have been something that didn't work. It's too hard. You're going to quit. So a lot of people will need to figure that out about themselves. A lot of people might get lucky and have some built-in motivation that feels like they want to put their life into.
So you're lucky too.
Oh my God, it's almost exclusively luck. Any entrepreneur you talk to that's had any measure of success that doesn't say that is just full of crap. We built a software company that we sold in 1999. It wasn't an internet-based software company, but the world was changing in 1999. Had we tried to sell it a year later, it wouldn't have been as good of an outcome, right? I'm incredibly lucky to have the co-founders that I've had, right, in my life. And I think it's been yin and yang with people like David Brown, who I've learned a ton from, but, sort of completed my skill set, right? And just to be able to meet him so early in my career, to be able to, meet people like Brad Feld, right? Jason Mendelson, and people at Foundry Group that help get Techstars off the ground. There's just no way if it wasn't right place, right time. And so one of the things I think about with Techstars is I can sort of make that happen for some other people now. And to me, it's in a way amplifying the give first that I got from those people. My dad's another one who was also an entrepreneur. That they helped me be successful. They helped me, be in the right place at the right time and gave me a lot of luck. And I can give that back to 10,000 people a year. That's pretty cool, right?
That is pretty impressive and pretty cool. And you mentioned your dad, and one of the things I've been talking a lot about is my dad over the last few days, especially. And the thing that comes to mind is he would always repeat this, right? He would always say, Ronsley, don't ever forget the platform you've been given. And what he meant by that was, don't forget all the people that have worked to give you the platform for what you think is starting from scratch. Like, don't forget all your grandparents, your parents, and all those people did to give you this position right now. Don't forget that someone takes out your garbage. Don't forget that, someone installed the air conditioning, that you can change the temperature of the room that you're in. That don't forget all the other things that are going on. And I love that you mentioned that, because it comes back to the support system, right? Like, who are the people around you that are telling you stuff that allow you, I suppose, a different perspective? Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, look, none of us would be where we are without the people that came before. And hopefully we're lucky enough to have learned something from them directly. But, great-grandparents, most of us never had the chance to learn directly from them, so we're getting it handed down. But it parallels to me back to the software thing. And it's why I love software is you're going to sit down and write code. Like, do you know how much code is underneath that code you're writing? Right? The thermostat in the room that you mentioned, right? The infrastructure that's been placed by people. And, we're adding layers to that, right? When I think about, my investing today, I'm a big infrastructure investor because I think that's something that people build on top of, like you build a house on a foundation, right? And the foundation that we're all given by ancestors, family, people around us to support us, there's literally no way you could do it without that. So that's a part of the luck too that we talked about earlier.
But also I think it's the movement, because the more we move, the more we take action, the more luck we create. And I think that has got a huge part to play in how lucky, quote unquote, we are.
I don't remember what the old saying is, but it sort of like put yourself in a good position to get lucky, right? If you're not skating to where the puck's going to be, if you're not, getting in front of the goal before the person shoots, you're not going to get the rebound, right? And if you're sitting there watching the game and not in it, you're probably not going to get lucky. So, hustle does have something to do with it. But I think the reality, I mean, when you're really introspective, there is privilege in the world, and I certainly have benefited from that, and many others that have been successful have benefited from that. And I think you have to recognize that. And part of what you try to do is change that for other people. That's what we do with our foundation, right? Which is focused on diversity, inclusion, and tech. A lot of people just have never met a venture capitalist, have never had the chance to pitch in front of an angel investor, don't even really know what that means, don't have any of those people around them, right? Come from a completely different set of circumstances. But talent is equally distributed in the world. Opportunity is not. So part of it is, how do we change that, right? Because that can lead to so much more for so many more people. So, I think a lot of us will say, yeah, we got lucky, but there's a lot of people who say, I didn't get lucky, but I want to change the world too. And I think we need to think about that as well.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Our aim with this audio documentary has always been to build a strong community of entrepreneurs and creatives to provide a space where they can use their voice to share their authenticity with the world. As a valued listener, your voice matters too. We love to hear your feedback and ideas, so don't be shy to let us know how we're doing in the ratings and comments. If you have a message for our production team or know someone who would be a perfect fit as a guest, you can find out more information on how to share your input at psychologyofentrepreneurship.com.
Every minute I spend with you, David, makes me feel things, which is awesome.
I'm already married, so sorry. You are too.
Yeah, I am too. Sorry. You mentioned art, and you mentioned art a lot. It seems like the biggest struggle for artists in whatever way, whether it's writing code or, producing an amazing dish to put on the table or creating a new business, the struggle seems to be that artists don't like to sell. their art because it's selling their soul. And the flip side of that is the business people who don't want to be artsy in any way because there's no ROI to what they're doing. I'm not going to do this if there's no ROI, right? How much does that stop us? I mean, and what are your thoughts on that? Because it seems like it's a recurring thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're being stopped by there's no ROI, you're doing it wrong. That's what I meant by my spreadsheet comment. I think starting startups from the spreadsheet is totally the wrong way to go. I think it has to start from the heart and what you actually care about, because that'll motivate you through the hard times. So, when people say, I don't want to do that because I don't know how I'd ever make any money doing that. So you'll figure that out, right? I've had enough experiences where, Techstars is a great example, right? There was really no growth model, no real business model to speak of. It's angel investing. It's usually not going to work, right? But when you scale it, you have opportunities like working with large corporations to power their innovation systems, to raising venture funds. I had a mentor once that this guy named Bill Warner, who's a fantastic entrepreneur and investor in Boston. Something I'll never forget is sitting at dinner with me, and he said, David, there's the center flow and there's the co-flow. And the center flow is the thing that you love and that you care about, and you can never stop pushing on it. You can never stop making progress on the center flow. The co-flows emerge, right? And that's where the business is. You just do the thing that you love. You do the best job you can at it, and things will emerge around it that are opportunities that come from the fact that you're focused on the center flow. And if you lose sight of the center flow and you go off and you say, I don't care about helping entrepreneurs succeed anymore, or whatever your passion is, and you just say, wow, there's this opportunity to go over here to this corporate innovation thing or this venture thing, and you give up on the center flow, the rest evaporates. That's, to me, the art part is just focus on the thing that you actually care about. Opportunities will emerge all around it. Don't worry, they'll come if you're excellent at that center flow and never lose sight of it. And I found that was true even with programming. It's probably true with, things like podcasting, right? Or having a media site, that people would say, well, that's not a scalable business. You say, I don't care, I love it. And I guarantee you things will emerge around it if you love it enough.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But what you kind of just rolled over on was the origin story of Techstars, and when you kind of started it without actually having the ROI model in mind. And I wonder how many people know that. And, from the sense of you started from a place of heart. Can you explain that and what happened? And do you remember the moments where you thought it wouldn't do what it was going to do, and then the moments that it exceeded your expectations?
Yeah, it's certainly true that when we started Techstars, we had no expectation that it would be a global organization, with portfolio of thousands of companies, right? We really, it was me in the very early days, because I was the only one that was active. It sounded like a fun thing to do. We thought, what's the worst thing that can happen? We can fund 10 startups here in Boulder. We'll make some new friends. We might lose all that money. That's okay, right? It was a small amount of money at that time. And it would be really fun, and we'd learn a lot, and we'd make some friends. And that's sort of like, okay, if that's the worst case, let's do it. And oh, by the way, you can maybe attract some cool stuff to Boulder, and have some fun technologies to play with. So, the idea that should ever scale was not even something that we thought about. It was literally a Boulder thing. It was 10 companies a year, and we got pull. So what surprised me was the pull. Communities instantly in the first year or two started calling us saying, can you bring this here?
Why do you think they did that? I mean, there's so many other venture funds being started. Why do you think they did that?
I, to this day, believe that it's #GiveFirst. I think that cultural value is something that resonated with people from day one. So even when, Y Combinator picked up stakes and left Boston, Bill Warner, who I mentioned earlier, and many others, called and said, there's something that you're doing that feels different than what they're doing. And we love Y Combinator's competitor of ours, but they do an awesome job. But it's just different, right? It's I feel like where perhaps there's a factory or some machinery there, tech services has that feeling of family, and like, I'm gonna help you and you're gonna help others. And that dynamic is what people felt. We were engaging the community, not saying, hey, I'm the guru, I'm David Cohen and I know everything and I can teach you how to be incredibly successful as a startup. That wasn't the vibe. The vibe was, I'm just here to connect the dots. We've got 150 successful mentors giving first, asking for nothing. It was suggested early on that they get equity, and nah, we don't want equity. Like, we just want to be helpful. Okay, that's cool. So people felt that in Seattle, people felt that in Boston, and we got pulled, I think, for that culture. And people were able to actually engage in it and be a part of it and feel like it was a thing they were doing and they were creating. Because, when you're a successful entrepreneur somewhere and you've done well, and, like, you could be sitting on your yacht and hanging out all day long, what's really cool is you feel like you're giving back in a way that's organized and that has impact, and you're doing it with peers, right? So it was just a model that at that time the word accelerator didn't exist. Brad Feld actually coined that word for this purpose, a startup accelerator. And, people were calling it an incubator. It's just like a lot of other things, but it wasn't, right? It was, we were investing the money, sure, but much, much more importantly, we were investing, the social relationships, the social capital, the mentorship. That is 99% of the value. And I think people saw that as different.
That value, the value of give first that you speak about, and how you talk about, having that pull because of that value. Do you remember in the early days when, if at all, it was hard to stick to the values that you built the company on?
It's always hard. Two specific things jump immediately to mind when you ask that question, and I'm going to protect the innocent. There was a person in the organization that was very high performing, and truly a great person. A lot of upside, a lot of potential, and this person's doing great today, and it's awesome, right? But it wasn't a cultural fit, and I don't like the word cultural fit. I usually like cultural add, but because of that value, right? And that is something that you can't compromise on, or it's not real. And so the real test is, are you prepared to fire someone that doesn't live that value, who's a very high performer? And I did that early on, and it was hard because you're just like, man, there's a superstar here that I'm, ejecting from the organization, from the system. And this doesn't feel right somehow, but, this value has to be more important. And, it was causing all kinds of stress that in the moment you weren't recognizing, and would have been, total disaster long term. So, that's how you live it. It's who you hire, but more importantly, who you fire. And I think the other thing that comes to mind is, the corporate innovation work that we do. So for those that don't know, today we work with major corporations like Amazon and Barclays Bank and Ford and many others to power accelerators for them. And, that was a co-flow that emerged from our focus on helping entrepreneurs succeed. So we're very clear here that our customer is the entrepreneur, right? But we have partners that are these large corporations, and they don't all act in a give first way towards startups. So we had to get clear that was our value. And then we were going to help our startups, protect them to make sure that they weren't harmed by people who didn't think that way. And we've had to say no to a lot of corporate partners that just didn't have the mindset of actually helping the entrepreneur succeed. It was, how could I take advantage of it and leverage it for our corporation? And that's okay if the way you want to do that is by helping the entrepreneur succeed. It doesn't mean that you have to live our value of give first, but it means we have to be aligned on what we're trying to accomplish. And so we had a couple missteps there, and, had to get clear on that, and it's cost us business. But, the values that you set out in your company as an entrepreneur have to be sacred, or else they don't mean anything. And so living them is the hard part.
Amen to that. There's another thing you mentioned about starting from the heart. And when you start from the heart. What, for someone listening for the first time, potentially someone is at a point where they're starting again as well. What would that mean, and how would you explain that?
Well, the idea of start from the heart is the same as sort of why. Why are you doing this thing, right? And so I think you just have to be really real with yourself, and that's how I would coach someone. I would say, tell me why you're doing this, and if I feel like it's at all made up, I just keep pushing on it. And I think it's natural to sort of defend your great business idea with passion, in air quotes, right? It's very easy to fake passion, right? But it's hard to fake obsession, for example. And so, were you put on this earth to do this? Are you thinking about it now? Do you want to have story of SendGrid, right? A company that we went in our accelerator, went public. I was on the board for a long time. Isaac, Tim, Jose, you sit these guys down and you talk about transactional email, the most boring thing I can think of to talk to you about right now. Protocols around transactional email. What does that even mean? What is DKIM? It's a protocol to do whatever with email. I don't care. You don't care. These guys would talk to you about it through the night, right? You see it in their eyes. Like, this is the subtle issue with this protocol. This is what causes all this problem. They actually live this world of email like it was their whole life, right? And, they would take a support call from someone who wasn't a customer just for the chance to talk to them about email, right? And actually help them with whatever the problem they were having. That is hard to fake, right? I'm passionate about it, pretty easy. So I try to push on that and find out where it intrinsically is coming from, what success means, why they care about this thing, where did that come from in their background, and not just, hear how much they love it or whatever, right? You see it, you don't hear about it.
I feel like I wanted to ask this question at the end, but I feel like this is a good time to ask the question. When we started talking about, we're talking about how, in between the conversation about passing stuff down through generations and what I learned from dad and granddad, and, we never got a chance to learn from great granddad. So what if we could imagine that your great grandchildren would listen? What kind of advice or what kind of stuff that you've learned through your life that you'd want them to listen to when they're 12 years old?
Yeah, well, I already know that they're not going to listen because my kids don't listen at all. So I found that I can't teach them anything. They're like golden retrievers when they're in front of their teachers, but when they're in front of me, like learning how to kick a soccer ball or, use a keyboard to learn how to type, it's like, you don't know, you can't teach me anything. So I know that dynamic exists. The equivalent question that I went through my head is like, what's the one thing you want them to know, right, about life and business and people? I think it's been really powerful for me to just have a belief system like Give First. And I would encourage them to have one and to live it. And it doesn't have to be mine, right? Because what changes the world is original thought, right? And I would hope that, they understand that they can be who they want to be, and they don't have to be, following in somebody's footsteps or doing it the way someone else did it. But they, as you said, can learn from the generalizations, right, of the people that come before them and from that infrastructure that's been laid and foundation. And so, don't make it up, but take something you believe and lean as hard as you can into it. And that's what can change the world.
So amazing. Foundations of entrepreneurship. When entrepreneurship is glorified today, there's no doubt about that. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And one of the things you said in this conversation was how hard entrepreneurship is. I don't think it ever gets easier, or maybe it does to a certain extent when you start dealing with the problems you thought were the main problems, and then those bring up other problems that you got to deal with, I suppose. What are the foundations? Like someone starting, first time, again, in your opinion, how would you mentor someone to kind of go, these are the foundations before we can even think about like, is there I don't know, I'll invest money in this. Does that make sense?
I'd probably just say tear down the wall, right? I mean, one foot in front of the other. The hardest part about starting is starting, right? We get all wrapped around the axle on, should I go, work in an entrepreneurial company first? Should I see how others have done it? And I don't know, if I'm playing golf, I'm just shooting for the hole, right? So I think you learn from failure and you learn from doing, and you never know, you might succeed. And so my favorite story on this is, we have a company called Everlater. It was a modest success. The founders went through the accelerator, and I remember when they applied, they said, we're two stockbrokers, Wall Street guys. We're relatively young. We were born down the hall from each other on the same day, and we've been best friends ever since. And we love to travel, and we're building this travel blogging company, right? But we don't know how to code. We don't have any money. All we know is how to do stock stuff on Wall Street, but we don't want to do that anymore because we just love to travel. So you could feel I'm going to give up this job because it's the thing I love is travel, and I want to help people love that. They created Everlater, and it was, what should we do? What foundation should we go get? Like, how could we get into Techstars in 5 years? And I said, why don't you try to get in this year? Well, we don't know how to code. We don't have anybody on our team that knows how to code. Why don't you learn how to code? And so they went and they learned how to code. Hello, brick wall. I'm just going to walk right through you, right? That sounds hard to a lot of people because a stockbroker learning how to code. And they were terrible at it. They'll laugh when they hear that. But I mean, in the beginning, they were terrible at it. And yet you could start to see the vision that they had and the product that they had in mind. By the way, Everlater is an anagram for traveler, I think. That's how they did it. But it was evident that they cared enough to make this thing happen that they were going to teach themselves how to code, something totally foreign to themselves, right? And they got in, and they had no business getting in. And the fact that they got in gave them a little money, allowed them to hire a programmer, allowed them to, attract some people because they were in this thing that was kind of cool. And they raised some money afterwards, and they sold the company to AOL eventually, right? And now still close to both the founders. One of them is a managing director for Techstars, right? And that's what sort of got them to that role. Has their own microfund today, in addition to that, and it's doing great. So it's just put one foot in front of the other, and the best time to start is yesterday, but you're too late, so do it today, right? And surround yourself with mentors that can help you.
Research by Cabbage Inc. showed that 92% of small business owners believe that mentors have a direct impact on the growth and survival of their business.
I love that because, especially in America, actually not in America, in general, I think in entrepreneurship, I get asked a lot, what's the next goal? And I don't have one. I'm in the sense that I never had the goal of making $1 million company or any of that kind of stuff in mind, right? So I don't know what the next big mountain is for me, and I'm actually, for me to hear that, it feels really good because I'm okay, at least because I keep feeling that, am I not ambitious enough? That's why I don't know what my next thing is, because I really enjoy putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, right back to art. Where does the next brush of paint go? It's feel, man. It's just feel, right? Is it because you took some technical class that told you where the next thing goes on the canvas? No, it's you feel like that's going to make it incrementally better. And you could paint that brushstroke or the one over here, and one of them feels intuitively like it's going to be more powerful. And so of all the options, you pick the one that feels the most powerful, and you put one foot in front of the other, and you build value over time. Now, I have no doubt that if you brought, Reid Hoffman in to run Techstars, it would go faster and get bigger. I have no illusion that we're doing it the best possible way. But I'm painting the picture the best I know how, one brush at a time. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. And I think that works, right? It's add value to the thing, right? And don't focus on, I need it to be $1 million or I need to get an exit. I just need it to be better. And if you're obsessed with the product, you want to make the product better for the end user, for the vision, that's the path to follow, not, what the textbook says that you should do to grow an enterprise, because it's just not going to be right. There's no general, if there were rules about how startups work and how they grow, everyone would follow that playbook. That's what I actually love about it is, there's no option to not learn, right? You've got to learn from every situation. Every time I work with a startup, I learn something new from somebody. Hopefully I can give them back something from pattern recognition or whatever, but I learn way more from the entrepreneurs and what they're trying and what they're doing. And it gives me ideas for my own business, but it's not a master plan. And don't fool yourself into thinking it would be, I'd say.
You mentioned pattern recognition, and I would say that that's probably one of your strengths that you would identify with. When you look at businesses or entrepreneurship today, what patterns are you seeing that maybe we are ignoring?
Well, I don't think we're ignoring it, but I mean, it's pretty obvious that there's become a sort of worshiping of fundraising, a worshiping of unicorn status. And it'll be interesting to look back, 20 years from now on all the unicorns. I mean, that curve is exponential, right? Number of unicorns created every year has just gone through the roof with the advent of, the SoftBank Vision Fund and, other groups, TPG, whoever, that are able to make a company overnight. And, in some ways, if I put $1 into your company at $1 billion pre-money valuation, you're a unicorn, right? That's not what they're doing, but it's sort of like that. It's, slapping a label on something before it's necessarily real or has fundamental quality as a business. So, we're the venture community worships the founder, right? The founder worships, raising money, and it's this cycle that's not necessarily healthy. We've also been more or less in a good market for, 13, 14 years. This will change, and dynamics will change again. And that, again, is one of the things that's fun about startups is you never know where it's going to go. It's all going to ebb and flow as a macro market. But that's the big one to me, is just this sort of worshiping the false gods, right? The fundraise, the, reaching a valuation as opposed to, revenues and employees that have great jobs and impact that your company's having and achievement of the mission and success in your own mind, as opposed to, this need to be recognized and famous. It's fundamentally what's wrong with the venture community is there's a lot of people waving their arms around about how great they are, and not a lot of people that are just doing great. Right.
One of the podcast episodes that I remember the most was Tony Robbins interviewing Coach John Wooden, and apart from I took 4 or 5 pages of notes, the big standout from that interview was, Ronsley, what's your definition of success? Because don't follow someone else's. Do you mind if I ask what yours is?
Look, I mean, ultimately everybody's put on the planet to, hopefully be happy, right? I mean, I think ultimately for me, it's just enjoyment of what I do and the impact of what I do. I don't really need more resources. I don't crave more resources. So I'm lucky in that way. So I'm not doing it for any of those reasons, right? I think being famous probably sucks. I work hard to avoid that. I don't want that either, right? And so, I'm doing the thing that I'm doing because I feel like it has impact and that it's helpful to others. And yeah, there's a byproduct of it generates, resources and flow for me personally, but that's no longer the motivation. It hasn't been for a long time. You talked about that, podcast that influenced you. One thing that influenced me a ton was, this notion of, plentiful, right? The idea that, the utility of money is something that people can read about. If someone has $100,000 or $150,000, their life is fundamentally the same. Even though that's a huge change in sort of net worth from that perspective. If someone has, say $1 million or $10 million, they can do different things and they can have different impact and they can have a different level of, maybe happiness, although that's not always equated. They certainly travel better. They can certainly do more stuff. There's a different utility. But, at some point you say, gosh, I don't, the life I live, I'm not trying to level it up, right? It's plenty good. And, kids are taken care of, families taken care of. And so you realize that that's not the driver, right? And it's a different level for different people. I know some people that are tortured by needing to get to the next level, that are so incredibly successful that they have all the wealth you can imagine. And I mean wealth, not just in money, but in just sort of health and, personal situation and all of that. But they just need the next level and they want to prove something to somebody. And I feel sorry for that a lot of times, right? Like, it's like, oh, is that any way to live, right? Like, enjoy what you have, right? And help others with it. So to me, that's success is something that I feel like is in the rearview mirror. Like, I'm not trying to impress anybody. I feel like I've got what I need, and with whatever years I have left, like, I'd like to have fun with it, and I'd like to make the world a better place.
Yeah. All right. I'd like to end on this because I think it's important. When you go to Techstars website, and you scroll all the way down, there's a whole section on mental health. It obviously means a lot to you and Techstars and everything that you do. I'd love to sort of talk about what situations made that such a big deal, and what is your impression of where the state of mental health in entrepreneurship is?
Yeah. So as investors in thousands of companies, you're going to run into people who are distraught, people who feel like they've raised money from someone and didn't return it, who take personal responsibility for that. In the context of the accelerator, it's a 3-month pressure cooker. It's designed to help you do more faster and build your network, but it's unsustainable activity beyond the 3 months. You have people that can just kind of get lost, right? They can forget who they are. They can literally crack. They can become suicidal. And you want to help with that in any way you can. It is part of the unfortunate reality of entrepreneurship. So to ignore it is crazy. We don't do enough. Certainly, we if you think about who Techstars is, we're 300 people. Probably 150 of us have started companies. Probably 100 of us are CEOs of those companies. So we've been through that too. And, we just want people to know that if you're not getting the support you need from your peers or in your context that you're in, like, we're here. And I'd say that's true of any entrepreneur in any context. It doesn't have to be in our portfolio. And we're not going to solve your problem, right? But we're going to try to help, right? So we have incredible resources. Another guy, if you had time in Boulder to interview, would be Jerry Colonna, who is a peer to Philip in his own world. They know each other. He's probably the best CEO coach on the planet. And he will jump in certain situations and help with that. So we just need to help people understand that they're not alone. That really is the phrase I use a lot about Techstars is you're not alone, right? Startups, being CEO, it all feels lonely, but I have 1,000 other people that are going through that I can connect you with. And, several of us on the executive team here have been through our own, challenges with just emotional health or, not balancing life out at all, right? And either overcome it or still struggle with it. So it's just a fact of life in entrepreneurship, and you almost can never do enough about it.
It's almost because everyone's putting their art on the line, right? Because when you put your art on the line, you're so connected to what people say that the wrong thing could affect you, almost.
Yep. And every, sad fact that really every scaled up early stage investor, accelerator program, whatever, has actually had events, right? Like there've been suicides and attempts and threats and, to do harm to oneself. And man, that'll wake you up quick, right? And you just want to try to get in front of that. But yes, I mean, it's your baby and someone's telling you your baby's ugly, right? And it's not going to work and it's not going to get funded. And that's sort of your identity in your life, but that's not really who you are. That's a part of who you are. I think helping people see that, like sometimes you just ask the question, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Like this company fails and then what? You get a job for $200,000 a year as an engineer. That's probably the worst thing that could happen. Then just recognize that, right? And what you don't want is the worst thing that could happen is they actually, do hurt themselves or, something like that. But that's what's happening in their mind. It's not what's happening in reality in a lot of cases, and just helping them see that as part of it.
I feel like the starting part, right? Sometimes when we spoke about going after one last startup, right? The imposter comes and plays a big part in there, and it says, why do something you love when you can do something that's profitable? And did you have something to add to that?
In the context of my own career, and I think, anytime someone talks about imposter syndrome, it really doesn't matter who you're talking to because pretty much everyone has it, right? Well, it's whether or not they admit it, especially if they're doing anything that's sort of, grown or become impactful. And my version of that is, why on one hand, why are there 300 employees and, a world of investors that actually think that they should entrust us with their career. And when you get into limited partners in our funds, like, why are people giving us like $500 million to go invest? Are they crazy? That's sort of the thing that rolls around your head. And am I really any better at this than someone that you would pick off the street? And, why me, right? And I have that like literally every day. And you try to channel it towards thankfulness and gratefulness, right? But the hardest part, we're funding 500 companies a year, a couple $100,000 per company. You can do the math. That money has to come from somewhere. It doesn't all flow back because we're growing every year, the footprint of the platform. So some of it flows back, but you're investing more every year. So you've always got to be, thinking about the capital to come in the future and, sitting there going like, can I do this? Like, is there any reason that someone would invest $1 billion on this? Right. And there is an economic reason, but am I the person that can do that? And, maybe not. Right. And you sort of doubt it, but then you think backwards, you're like, why did they already give me this money? And oh my gosh, I hope that performs and all that, same pressure and thinking of, I'm running this company, helping run this company. Like, am I even qualified to do that? I've never run a company this big before. Right. So it's just ever present. And I think it's ever present for especially CEOs, but investors, founders, founder who raises a $500,000 seed round is wondering, well, those people must be crazy. Why did they give me that money? Hopefully they're wondering that, but I think, believe in yourself a little bit, but it's at every level in every organization. I mean, the president of the United States, I'm sure, is wondering, maybe not in this case, 2019. But generally, I would hope that that person would be saying, why was I entrusted with this incredible, platform, this incredible opportunity, this incredible responsibility? And so, again, you're not alone.
Thank you for saying that, because I've said this so many times. Like, I really don't have any idea what I'm doing because I've never led a company with so many people, a global company before. So if I said that I knew what I was doing, I'd be lying. And sometimes I can see people in the room go like, did he just say that? But it's the honest truth. I've never run this kind of company before. And going back to what you said earlier, I'm doing the best I can.
Seems like you're doing well. I was in a meeting with our executive leadership team in Connecticut, and someone literally pounded their fist on the table and they said, I don't know where we're going. And the reaction at first was, what do you mean you don't know where we're going? We talk about where we're going all the time. We have clear vision. We understand where we're going. No, I don't actually know. I think you know. Tell me, they said. And there was a choice that was made in that moment, which was really, really powerful, which was, guys, I need your help. I do think I know where we're going, but I don't think I'm doing a very good job of communicating it or articulating it. Can you help me with that? I don't think it's my strength. And I'll tell you, our executive team has bonded in a way that I've never seen before after that moment of humility. So the leader out there that says, I have to know everything and I can't show the weakness is maybe missing an opportunity. Really, really powerful thing that I've seen happen here.
That is extremely, I mean, there's nothing I love more than a team coming together in a moment of what seems to be everything falling apart, right? I mean, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff.
Hang around here, you'll see plenty of it.
I can imagine. When you were talking about imposter syndrome, and I'm going to end on this because I'm aware of time. You spoke. I find it insane that after all this practice, after all the stuff that you've done, that you still have that. And I mean, I'm lucky that I have a good support system around me and good friends and a good wife that actually helps me when I doubt myself and doubt the fact that I'm like, I've made all these promises. Now I've got to go around and keeping all these promises. And sometimes that gets to me. Thank you for sharing that. Then do you see that a lot around you, that people kind of feel like they can't say that?
Yeah. I mean, I have personal experience with CEOs that feel like, that would be seen as weakness, right? Of course I should be here. Of course I know everything. Like, I am your leader, follow me. And it's a style thing. And those people break, right? Because they don't actually know what to do next. And, they can't say to their board in a moment of humility, I need help on this one. They have to say, this is what we're doing and blah, blah, blah. And of course, most boards would say, I'm just here to support you and great. And the company goes off on the wrong path, maybe scales a model that's completely unsustainable or whatever, versus like, guys, we have an asset here. Like, people love the brand, they love the thing, but I don't think that we should just scale it because it feels a little irresponsible. Maybe that's heretical. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just a little lost. Like, I could imagine, for example, the WeWork board having a conversation like that at some point in their history. But I suspect, and I don't know Adam, so apologize if I have this totally wrong, but just as an example, that they were led by a leader who had no doubt or was presenting no doubt. Maybe the company will be fine. It is an awesome brand. It's an amazing thing. He'll certainly do fine. But, maybe it didn't live up to its potential yet because of that. And, watching those CEOs break is hard. They get fired, they get replaced. But the CEO with humility, a lot of times just gets the help they need. And, they build a better company and they learn from it. And so I don't think people are going to change. I think generally people fall in one of those categories. They're either going to say, I don't know what to do here, or they're going to pretend they do. And they're going to play it that way pretty much all the time. And one group is going to break and the other group is, going to learn, hopefully.
Yeah. David Cohen, this has been a slice of heaven. Thank you.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Coming up on the Psychology of Entrepreneurship, Numdara Uncut.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
You know, I've been pre-programmed since I was very young. My parents would tell me, you can study whatever you want. In the end, you're going to come back and work with your father anyway. Is your business plan correct? Is the value you're adding truly a value? And it's not a value in the mind of the entrepreneur. You have to look at it from the mind of the consumer or the people who will buy your product or service.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I interviewed David because he is just such an amazing human being. I love every moment I get to connect with David. He has founded several companies and has invested in hundreds of startups such as Uber, Twilio, SendGrid, Full Contact, and Sphero. In total, these investments have gone on to create more than $100 billion in value. He is one of the co-founders of Techstars, which I believe is the world's nicest startup accelerator program that is built on the Give First principles, which is a podcast, by the way, that you can find on any of your favorite podcast players. Techstars only accepts approximately 1% of all applications. The Techstars experience has been turned into a TV reality show on Bloomberg TV. He and Brad Feld co-authored the book Do More Faster, Techstars Lessons to Accelerate Your Startup. He is a deep thinker, a creator, and a friend.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
This is a Must Amplify production. Special thanks to every guest expert that has appeared on the show. Editing, voiceovers, and sound design by Kaylee Bonnyman and Tiago Vega. Guest research and content by Claire Gould and Corinne Castles. Project managed by Kaylee Bonnyman. Produced and hosted by me, Ronsley Vaz. For more episodes and where to listen, go to mustamplify.com/POE.
Love the polished audio docuseries style of this podcast, The Psychology of Entrepreneurship? At We Are Podcast, you can learn how to create a similar style for your own show. This revolutionary virtual event assembles podcasters, entrepreneurs, and marketers in one spot, so you're able to learn from the masters. Head straight to wearepodcast.com to reserve your spot at our next event.